1770. Boston didn't always look like the city we know today. In the earliest views, it almost feels like Boston was floating. The town sat like a small island in the harbor, surrounded on all sides by the cold Atlantic, tied to the mainland by only a fragile strip of land. 1771. In this era, the Back Bay didn't exist at all. There were no streets, no buildings, no parks. It was open water, marshes, and total flats stretching outward. Boston lived with the rhythm of the sea, rising and falling with every tide like a city breathing with the ocean. 1772. The skyline was dense but small. Brick homes, church steeples, and narrow streets were packed tightly together. Boston looked proud, but also lonely, still a distant outpost of the British Empire, exposed to wind, storms, and the uncertainty of the future. 1773. To enter Boston by land, you had to cross Boston Neck, a thin stretch of ground often washed over by high tides. It wasn't just a road, it was the city's only escape route, a narrow lifeline. Entering Boston felt deliberate, almost like stepping through a guarded threshold. 1774. Near the entrance, travelers would pass the gallows standing on the left. It was a harsh symbol, reminding everyone that order was enforced here. The air smelled of marsh mud, salt water, and damp earth. Even before reaching the town, the landscape carried a quiet sense of warning. 1775. Deep inside town stood Long Wharf, the beating engine of Boston's survival. Ships crowded the docks so tightly they looked like a forest of masts frozen in winter. This was where tea, spices, gunpowder, letters, and news from London arrived, flowing straight into the heart of the colony. 1776. At the center of the city stood the old State House. Elegant and imposing, it represented royal control and authority. The Lion and Unicorn of England still watched from the rooftop, symbols of a loyalty that was rapidly weakening. Beneath those statues, history was already gathering. 1777. On the streets, daily life still looked strangely orderly. Carriages rolled slowly over cobblestones. Men wore wigs. Women moved in fine silk. It was a city trying to preserve British calm and civility even as anger and rebellion simmered underneath. 1778. But that calm didn't last. British troops arrived, and Boston changed forever. Red coats filled the streets, sharp against the gray town. The city was no longer just home. It became an occupied garrison, a place where freedom felt suddenly restricted. 1779. Where families might one day picnic, tents now covered the common in endless rows. The open green space became a parade ground for the king's army. Locals watched from the edges, uneasy and silent, as soldiers drilled where cattle once grazed. 1780. Near the waterfront stood Faneuil Hall, bustling with commerce and argument. Fishermen sold their catch. Farmers brought produce, and above them, voices debated rights, taxes, and liberty. Politics and daily life blended together here, whispers of revolution mixing with marketplace noise. 1781. Beacon Hill was still steep and rugged, rising like a natural fortress above Boston. A beacon pole stood at its summit, ready to warn of invasion. The landscape felt raw and unfinished, not yet reshaped by filling and construction. The town below looked small beneath it. 1782. After the Tea Party, the British Navy closed Boston's port. The harbor fell unnaturally silent. Ships sat idle, warehouses shut tight, ropes hanging slack. The stillness felt heavy, like a city being slowly squeezed economically and emotionally. 1783. In the north end, the Old North Church rose sharply against the twilight. The streets below were narrow, dark, and winding, lit only by hearth fires and moonlight. Boston looked peaceful on the surface, but tension sat in the shadows, waiting for a signal. 1784. These views remind us the revolution didn't happen on a grand stage. It happened here, in muddy streets, crowded docks, dark taverns, and quiet neighborhoods. Boston was a small town grappling with an enormous idea, standing at the edge of something unstoppable. 1785. Boston in the 1770s was full of contrasts: civility and tension, trade and blockade, crowded wharves and empty silence. It was fragile, exposed, and deeply alive with the feeling that the old world was fading and the new one was being born. 1786. Thank you for walking through the streets of early Boston. These old images remind us that cities are living stories shaped by people, conflict, and change. And Boston's story, in the 1770s, was only just beginning.